Hello everyone, Dr. Alan Mandell here. Welcome back to my channel, Science of Healing. Have you ever wondered how someone can reach 103 years old with a sharp mind, steady energy, and minimal disease? And what if I told you this person eats the same 4 foods every single day? Doctors are stunned, not because it's magic, but because the science behind these foods is so powerful. It challenges what we thought we knew about aging. Today, we're breaking down the 4 simple foods that support longevity, reduce inflammation, protect your heart, and strengthen your brain, and how you can start using them daily. For decades, we were told that longevity lives in complexity, in exotic powders, rare supplements, biohacks, and secret formulas hidden behind laboratory doors. But what if the real secret to living past 100 isn't complexity at all? It's consistency. What if the most powerful anti-aging strategy on earth is not found in a pill bottle, but on a simple plate, repeated every single day? Modern science is finally catching up to something traditional cultures have known for centuries. The body does not respond to extremes, it responds to patterns. Your cells are listening to what you eat daily, not occasionally, not once a week, daily. Research in nutritional epidemiology consistently shows that long-term dietary patterns predict lifespan far more accurately than isolated superfoods. In other words, it's not what you eat sometimes that determines your future. It's what you eat all the time. Take extra virgin olive oil, a cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet. In the landmark PREDIME trial, participants at high cardiovascular risk who consumed olive oil daily had significantly fewer heart attacks and strokes compared to those on a low-fat diet. Not because they took more supplements, not because they exercised more, but because day after day, meal after meal, anti-inflammatory polyphenols entered their bloodstream and protected their arteries. Oleocanthal, a natural compound in olive oil, has been shown to act similarly to ibuprofen in reducing inflammatory pathways. And chronic inflammation is the silent engine behind heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and even certain cancers. Now, imagine this. Every time you drizzle 2 tablespoons of olive oil onto your vegetables, you are delivering thousands of antioxidant molecules that neutralize oxidative stress, the very process that rusts your cells from the inside. Oxidative damage accumulates over decades, but so does protection. And protection only works when it's consistent. Then come leafy greens, spinach, kale, arugula, often ignored, often underappreciated. But inside these leaves are dietary nitrates that convert into nitric oxide, a molecule so powerful it relaxes your blood vessels, improves circulation, and lowers blood pressure naturally. Research from Rush University found that individuals who consumed at least 1 serving of leafy greens daily experienced significantly slower cognitive decline, the equivalent of being 11 years younger in brain function compared to those who rarely ate them. 11 years. That's not a supplement claim, that's peer-reviewed science. The reason is simple. Better blood flow means better oxygen delivery to the brain. Better oxygen means better mitochondrial function. And your mitochondria, the power plants of your cells, determine how gracefully you age. But nitric oxide levels drop as we grow older, unless you feed your body the raw materials daily. Not occasionally, daily. Now let's talk about legumes, lentils, chickpeas, beans, the humble foods that anchor the diets of the longest living populations on Earth. In longevity, hotspots like Okinawa and Sardinia, legumes are not trendy. They are routine. They stabilize blood sugar, preventing the insulin spikes that damage blood vessels and accelerate aging. They are loaded with fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, producing short-chain fatty acids that reduce inflammation and strengthen the immune system. A healthy gut microbiome has been directly linked to reduced risk of obesity, heart disease, depression, and neurodegeneration. And what shapes your microbiome most profoundly? What you feed it every day. Here's what most people don't realize. Nearly 70% of your immune system resides in your gut. If you nourish it consistently, it protects you consistently. If you neglect it, it weakens quietly over time. Longevity is not dramatic, it is cumulative. And then there are walnuts, small, unassuming, shaped like the human brain. They are one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically ALA, which has been shown to reduce systemic inflammation and support cardiovascular health. Large-scale studies following thousands of adults over decades show that regular nut consumption is associated with a significantly lower risk of heart disease and premature death. Just a handful a day. Not a bag, not a binge. A handful repeated daily. The magic is not in excess. The magic is in rhythm. Here's the shocking truth. Most chronic diseases do not appear overnight. They develop silently over 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. Plaque builds slowly in arteries. Insulin resistance creeps up gradually. Cognitive decline begins decades before symptoms appear. And just as disease accumulates quietly, so does health. Every anti-inflammatory meal is a deposit into your biological savings account. Every serving of greens supports your blood vessels. Every spoonful of olive oil shields your cells. Every half cup of legumes stabilizes your metabolism. Every handful of walnuts nourishes your brain. One day will not change your life, but 10,000 days will. We live in a culture addicted to quick fixes. But the human body was not designed for quick fixes. It was designed for daily nourishment. The research is clear. Dietary patterns matter more than isolated interventions. In fact, when scientists analyze populations with exceptional longevity, they do not find extreme calorie restriction or miracle supplements. They find consistency, simple foods, repeated daily. Your genes are not your destiny. Lifestyle can influence gene expression through epigenetics, meaning what you eat can turn protective genes on and harmful genes off. But gene expression responds to chronic signals, not occasional ones. The fork in your hand is more powerful than you think, not once, not twice, but every day. Imagine this. If you begin today, just one serving of greens, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, half a cup of legumes, a handful of walnuts, and repeat it for the next decade, you are not just eating. You are programming your future biology. You are lowering inflammatory markers. You are improving endothelial function. You are supporting mitochondrial efficiency. You are protecting cognitive pathways long before decline begins. Longevity is not built in the doctor's office. It is built in the kitchen. And here's the most empowering part. These foods are affordable, accessible, not exotic, not extreme. You don't need perfection. You need persistence. Consistency over complexity. That is the real secret. Because in the end, your body doesn't care about trends. It responds to what you repeatedly provide. Feed it protection daily, and it will protect you back. Feed it nourishment daily, and it will fight for you daily. The choice is not dramatic. It is simple, but repeated long enough, simple becomes extraordinary. Right now, inside your body, there may be a silent fire burning, and you can't feel it, you can't see it, and most people don't even know it exists until it's too late. It's called chronic inflammation, and it is the hidden engine behind heart disease, diabetes, stroke, arthritis, Alzheimer's, and even certain cancers. Unlike the swelling you see when you sprain your ankle, this inflammation is quiet, low-grade, and relentless. It damages blood vessels one microscopic layer at a time. It disrupts insulin signaling. It weakens neurons. It accelerates aging at the cellular level. And according to research published in major medical journals, chronic inflammatory diseases are now responsible for more than half of all deaths worldwide. But here's what's extraordinary. This fire is not unstoppable. It is heavily influenced by what you put on your plate every single day. Take extra virgin olive oil, a foundation of the Mediterranean diet, consistently ranked as one of the healthiest eating patterns on Earth. Scientists discovered that olive oil contains oleocanthal, a natural compound that inhibits inflammatory enzymes in the same pathway targeted by ibuprofen. Imagine that, a food, not a drug, influencing the same biochemical route used to control pain and inflammation. In large clinical trials like Predimed, individuals consuming olive oil daily showed significant reductions in cardiovascular events. Their arteries were not just passively existing, they were actively being protected from oxidative assault. Because inflammation and oxidation go hand in hand. When LDL cholesterol becomes oxidized, it embeds into artery walls, triggering immune responses that form plaque. That plaque can rupture without warning, causing a heart attack in seconds. The terrifying part? Plaque buildup can begin in your 20s. But antioxidants in olive oil help neutralize free radicals before they ignite that destructive cascade. Every drizzle is not just flavor, it's biochemical defense. Then there are leafy greens, spinach, kale, arugula, loaded with dietary nitrates that convert into nitric oxide, a molecule so powerful it was awarded a Nobel Prize for its discovery in cardiovascular physiology. Nitric oxide relaxes and widens blood vessels, reducing blood pressure and improving circulation. But chronic inflammation damages the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your arteries, reducing nitric oxide production and stiffening vessels over time. That stiffness increases stroke risk. It strains the heart. It diminishes oxygen delivery to the brain. Studies show that higher vegetable intake is directly associated with lower inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. When inflammation drops, endothelial function improves. When endothelial function improves, blood flows freely. And when blood flows freely, organs receive life-sustaining oxygen. That means sharper cognition, stronger heart performance, and more resilient tissues. This isn't theory, it's physiology. Now consider legumes, lentils, chickpeas, beans, staples in longevity regions such as Okinawa and Sardinia. These populations don't just live long, they live long with lower rates of chronic inflammatory disease. Legumes are packed with soluble fiber, which slows glucose absorption and stabilizes blood sugar. Why does that matter? Because repeated blood sugar spikes trigger inflammatory pathways. High glucose levels generate advanced glycation end products, compounds that stiffen tissues and damage proteins. Over time, that process contributes to vascular aging, kidney damage, and cognitive decline. Fiber also feeds beneficial gut bacteria. And here's the shocking truth. Your gut microbiome directly regulates systemic inflammation. When harmful bacteria dominate, they produce endotoxins that leak into circulation, activating immune responses. But when beneficial bacteria thrive, they produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which calm inflammatory signaling and strengthen the intestinal barrier. Nearly 70% of your immune system resides in your gut. Feed it wisely and it protects you. Neglect it and inflammation spreads silently. And then come walnuts, rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid known to reduce inflammatory markers. Omega-3s compete with omega-6 fatty acids in your body. When omega-6 intake is excessive, common in processed foods, it promotes pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. But omega-3s shift the balance toward anti-inflammatory mediators. Clinical research shows that regular nut consumption is associated with lower CRP levels and reduced cardiovascular mortality. Just a handful daily has measurable effects on inflammatory biomarkers. Think about that. Not a pharmaceutical, not an invasive procedure, a handful of nuts. Here's what most people don't realize. Chronic inflammation doesn't just damage the heart, it disrupts insulin receptors, paving the way for type 2 diabetes. It activates microglia in the brain, contributing to neurodegeneration. It interferes with collagen integrity, accelerating skin aging. It weakens immune regulation, increasing vulnerability to infection. Inflammation is not a single disease. It is a biological storm that touches every organ system. And yet, every meal is an opportunity to calm that storm. The foods we've discussed share a common thread. They are dense in polyphenols, antioxidants, fiber, and healthy fats that interrupt inflammatory pathways at multiple levels. They reduce oxidative stress. They improve lipid profiles. They stabilize blood glucose. They support gut integrity. They enhance nitric oxide production. It's not one mechanism. It's a symphony of protective effects. But here's the most powerful truth. Inflammation builds slowly, and so does healing. You cannot extinguish a decades-long fire overnight, but you can stop adding fuel. Every ultra-processed meal high in refined sugar and inflammatory oils pours gasoline on cellular stress. Every anti-inflammatory meal reduces the sparks. Over weeks, inflammatory markers can decline. Over months, endothelial function can improve. Over years, risk trajectories shift dramatically. Researchers studying dietary patterns consistently find that populations consuming anti-inflammatory diets have significantly lower rates of cardiovascular events, cognitive impairment, and metabolic syndrome. It's not coincidence, it's cumulative biology. Imagine your bloodstream as a river. Inflammation fills it with debris, oxidized lipids, inflammatory cytokines, damaged proteins. But anti-inflammatory foods act like a filtration system, clearing that river gradually, restoring clarity and flow. And the clearer the river, the healthier the organs it nourishes. This is not about fear, it's about empowerment, because while chronic inflammation is widespread, it is profoundly modifiable. You have influence over it 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, small, consistent decisions that compound into measurable biological change. And here's what makes this message urgent. You may feel fine while inflammation quietly progresses. Heart disease often announces itself with the first heart attack. Cognitive decline may not be obvious until significant neuronal damage has already occurred. Waiting for symptoms is waiting too long. The time to reduce inflammation is before disease appears. That means olive oil instead of processed seed oils, leafy greens instead of refined starches, legumes instead of sugary snacks, walnuts instead of ultra-processed desserts. Simple substitutions, repeated daily. You are not powerless against aging. You are not a passive victim of genetics. You are a participant in your biology. And every anti-inflammatory bite is a message to your cells. Protect, repair, restore. The silent fire does not have to win, but the extinguishing begins today. Longevity is often portrayed as a mysterious gift, something bestowed only on the lucky or the genetically blessed. But science tells a different story. Across the world, in places known as blue zones, Okinawa, Sardinia, and Ikaria, people live not just longer, but healthier, sharper, and more energetic lives. And there is a common thread, a simple daily ritual that shapes every decade of their existence. What they eat consistently every single day shapes not just their lifespan, but their health span. Their secret is not in extremes, not in supplements, not in gimmicks. It is in daily habits, repeated with unwavering consistency. Consider legumes, lentils, chickpeas, beans, humble foods that most modern diets ignore. In these blue zones, legumes are eaten nearly every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and science explains why. Legumes are packed with soluble fiber, which slows the absorption of glucose, preventing dangerous spikes in blood sugar. Those spikes, repeated over years, damage insulin receptors, provoke inflammatory pathways, and accelerate the aging process. They lead to diabetes, heart disease, and cognitive decline. But with legumes, that cascade is interrupted. Half a cup a day is enough to stabilize metabolism, feed beneficial gut bacteria, and reduce systemic inflammation. Fiber is not just roughage, fiber is armor. The gut microbiome is another critical piece of this puzzle. Emerging research shows that nearly 70% of the immune system resides in the gut, and the microbiome communicates constantly with your organs, your blood, your brain. When harmful bacteria dominate, they produce toxins that silently travel through your bloodstream, activating inflammatory pathways that damage your vessels and your neurons. But when beneficial bacteria thrive, nourished by fiber-rich foods like legumes, leafy greens, and nuts, they produce metabolites that calm inflammation, strengthen immunity, and even influence mood. Your daily meals are literally shaping the microscopic communities that protect you from disease. It's not just about feeding the gut. It's about what those meals do for your metabolism, your blood sugar, and your long-term risk of chronic disease. Observational studies show that populations eating legumes regularly have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. In fact, some studies suggest that consuming beans just a few times per week can reduce the risk of heart disease by nearly 20%. That's not magic, that's science. And it is repeated daily, consistently for decades that produces those extraordinary results. Next, think about nuts, particularly walnuts. Walnuts are more than a snack. They are a concentrated source of omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenols, and antioxidants that support brain function, reduce inflammation, and protect the heart. Research tracking thousands of adults over decades shows that even small, consistent consumption of nuts is associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease and longer lifespan. One handful a day, repeated faithfully, protects neurons from oxidative damage and reduces arterial inflammation. This is an example of a food whose benefits compound over years, quietly, invisibly, without drama. Extra virgin olive oil, the cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet, also exemplifies the power of consistency. Oleocanthal, a compound in olive oil, works in the body like a mild anti-inflammatory drug. It reduces inflammatory markers, protects arterial walls, and shields the brain from age-related degeneration. The protective effect is not immediate. It accumulates over time like a slow, persistent insurance policy for your cells. Populations that incorporate olive oil into almost every meal show dramatically lower rates of heart disease and stroke compared to those who consume it sporadically or not at all. Leafy greens are no different. Spinach, kale, arugula, these leaves are loaded with nitrates that convert into nitric oxide, a molecule that dilates blood vessels and improves circulation. Improved circulation means better oxygen delivery to every organ, every tissue, every cell. It's not just about heart health. Better blood flow preserves cognitive function and delays age-related decline in brain performance. Long-term studies have shown that individuals consuming at least one serving of leafy greens per day experience slower cognitive decline, effectively aging more than a decade slower in brain function than those who rarely eat them. That is staggering, and it only happens through daily, repeated action. What ties these foods together is not a single nutrient or miraculous compound. It is a pattern of consistent, deliberate nourishment that shapes your biology at every level. Your cells respond to the signals you give them. They are influenced by the metabolites, polyphenols, fatty acids, and fibers delivered through your diet. But these signals are cumulative. They are not one-off miracles. You can eat a handful of walnuts today, a salad tomorrow, a bean stew next week, and gain nothing. The body responds to repetition over time, building resilience, strength, and protection gradually. Consider insulin resistance, a condition that quietly destroys health over decades. It begins with repeated spikes in blood sugar, often from refined carbohydrates, sugary beverages, and processed foods. Over time, cells stop responding properly to insulin. Inflammation rises. arteries stiffen, cognitive decline accelerates, heart disease risk skyrockets. But if you replace even a portion of these foods with legumes, leafy greens, nuts, and olive oil, you are sending a different signal, one that stabilizes glucose, reduces oxidative stress, and calms inflammation. It is subtle, almost invisible, yet it compounds daily into profound long-term protection. The power of daily habits extends beyond physical health. There is emerging evidence that consistent, healthy eating patterns influence epigenetic expression, the way genes turn on and off. Certain compounds in olive oil, nuts, legumes, and leafy greens can activate protective genes and suppress harmful ones. In other words, your daily meals may literally rewrite the expression of your DNA in favor of longevity. That is not science fiction. That is molecular biology, backed by peer-reviewed research. And here is the part that most people find astonishing. These foods are ordinary. They are inexpensive. They are accessible. You do not need to travel the world for rare powders, exotic roots, or costly supplements. The diets of the longest-lived humans are simple, but simple repeated daily becomes extraordinary. The effect is cumulative. A decade of consistent dietary patterns yields benefits that no intermittent miracle intervention can match. What is remarkable about blue zone populations is not just their longevity, it is their health span, the years they live free from chronic disease. People over 100 in Okinawa and Sardinia rarely suffer from diabetes, rarely experience cognitive decline, rarely have cardiovascular disease. And their secret is not luck, it is repetition. Every day, every meal, they nourish themselves in ways that cumulatively protect their heart, brain, gut, and cells. The lesson is clear. Longevity is built on daily habits. Genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And the most powerful lifestyle factor of all is consistent nourishment. The fork in your hand is more powerful than any pill, any supplement, any fleeting health trend. Repetition compounds. Simple foods repeated faithfully build resilient bodies, sharpen minds, and extend life. Start small. Start today. 1 handful of walnuts, 1 salad with olive oil, half a cup of beans, a serving of leafy greens. Repeat every day, not occasionally, not when convenient, daily. Over years, these small actions accumulate into monumental biological change. The difference between a 70-year-old burdened by chronic disease and a vibrant centenarian often lies in the invisible decades of daily nourishment. Longevity is not a secret. It is not reserved for the lucky. It is a habit, a commitment, a series of small, consistent actions repeated day after day. When you begin to see food not as fuel or indulgence, but as a daily message to your cells, a tool to protect your arteries, your brain, your immune system, you begin to participate actively in your own lifespan. Every meal becomes an opportunity, every bite a choice. Every day a step toward decades of healthier living. Consistency is not glamorous. It is quiet. But over time, quiet becomes extraordinary. Over time, ordinary foods repeated faithfully yield longevity, health, and vitality. The people who live longest are not extraordinary because of their genes. They are extraordinary because of their daily choices, repeated with discipline, persistence, and unwavering commitment to their bodies. And that, above all, is a lesson worth learning.